Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about percent change. A percent of change is a ratio that compares the change in quantity to the original amount. Remember, when we're talking about a ratio is just another word for fraction. Okay, so now we're going to use our equation, which we have right here, and we're going to have percent of change is equal to our amount of change over our original amount. So this is our equation that we're going to use to find percent of change. So when you compare the amount of change to the original amount in a ratio, you are determining the percent of change. The percent of change is based on the original amount. So we're always going to be looking at our original amount and our new amount. Whether it has gone up or down, it is going to tell us whether it is percent increase or percent decrease. So our original quantity is increased, then it is called percent of increase. If our original quantity is decreased, then it is a percent of decrease. So if our original quantity goes up, our percent is going up. It's increasing. If our original quantity goes down or decreases, then our percent is decreasing. So we say have the same two equations here, and these are both very important because they're almost exactly the same thing. We have amount of increase over original amount, and this is to find percent of increase. We have down here percent of decrease, amount of decrease over the original amount. Okay, so that's enough of the words. Let me show you how we can use it when it comes to a problem. So now let's look at example number 1. And before we get onto that, I'm going to go ahead and block out all of it, just about, so that I can have some space to work with. Okay. So here we have on number 1, determine the percent of change in the cost of gasoline from 1970 to 2010. Round to the nearest whole percent if necessary. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have to figure out where my percent change is going from. So I have percent, is it increasing or is it decreasing? Well, I am going from 1970 to 2010. So I am going from $1.30 to $2.95. And as we can see, that's going up, or it's increasing. So I'm going to have percent of increase. Now if we look back of our formula for percent of increase, I'm just going to shorten it a little bit. Percent of increase was equal to the amount of our increase so the amount of increase, or the amount that it goes up, over our original amount. Okay, so now that I have that, I know that it's percent increase. It's percent increase from 130 to 295. I have original amount of increase and my original. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this. Make myself some more room. So I need to find out how much it increased by. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my $2.95, which is my $2 and my 2010 price of gasoline, and I'm going to subtract the price from 1970, which was $1.30. So 5 minus 0 is 5. 9 minus 3 is 6. I bring my decimal straight down. 2 minus 1 is 1. So now I found that my amount of increase is $1.65. So I'm going to go back to my original formula, which was percent of increase, and that is going to be the amount of increase over my original. So I have my percent of increase, and I'm going to replace all of my numbers. So my amount of increase, it increased by $1.65. So I'm going to have $1.65, and I'm going to put that over my original, and my original was when we started in 1970, which is $1.30. Now I'm going to simplify the problem. So $1.165 divided by 130, and that is going to give me a percent increase of 1.27 roughly. So then from here I need to round to the nearest percent. So first thing I need to do is I need to write this as a percent. The way we go from decimal percent is, if you remember in a previous video, DP. We have decimal and percent. So if we have the decimal, we have to move the decimal twice to the right, and that'll give us the percent. So using DP, I'm going to move my decimal twice to my right, 1, 2, and that is going to be my percent. So I am left with 127%. So the cost of gasoline increased from 1970 to 2010 by 127%. Now we're on to example number 2. And example number 2 says Yusuf bought a DVD recorder for $280. Now it is on sale for $220. Determine the percent of change in the price. Round to the nearest whole percent if necessary. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have to compare my numbers. So he bought a DVD recorder for $280, and it is on sale now for $220. So I need to recognize it went from 280 to 220, and that is a decrease, or it went down in price. So now that I know it's a decrease, I'm going to take my original amount, which is my $280. So I'm going to take my $280, which is my original amount, and I'm going to subtract that from my new amount, which is my $220. So 280 minus 220, and that gives me $60. And that is my amount of decrease. So now I have to go back to my formula, which we saw at the beginning, and I have my percent of decrease formula, which was my amount of decrease over my original quantity. So using my formula, I'm going to plug in my numbers. So I'm going to have my amount of decrease. So it decreased by $60, and I'm going to put that over my original amount, which was my $280. So 280. So now I'm going to simplify by dividing. 60 divided by 280 is going to give me roughly about 0.21. Now I'm left with 0.21, but I can't use that yet because it has to be in a percent. So again, I have to go back to my DP, and I have a decimal, and I need to change that to percent. So my decimal is going to move to the right because I'm going from decimal to percent, and I'm going to move it 2 times. So I'm going to move my decimal 2 times to the right, 1, 2, and I'm going to be left with 21%. So he found that it is now on sale for 21% less the amount he bought it for originally. That was $280. Now it is your turn to do the got it's. Make sure you do them in class because we are going to be checking them in your notes, as well as you never know when we're going to be used as a POD or exit ticket. So go ahead and now pause the video, stop it, and do your got it's. Okay, now that you've completed your got it's, we're going to go ahead and go on to example number 3. Example number 3 is going to take us another few steps, but it's not as hard as it seems. So the table below shows the population of 4 cities located in Texas. Compare the percent of change for Odessa and Laredo. Round to the nearest whole percent. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at Odessa and Laredo. I'm not going to do it that way because then I'm going to block it out. So I'm going to do it with my pen instead. Hopefully you guys can see it. So Odessa is right here, and we're going to use all of that information, and we're going to compare that to Laredo, which is right under it. Okay, so now we're going to compare our percent of change for both of them. So the first thing I need to do is I need to find my percent of change for Odessa or Laredo, whichever one I want. So I'm going to start first with Odessa because it's the one on the top. So Odessa. So with Odessa, I'm seeing that my population originally was at the year 2000 was 121,123 people. My population in 2010 was 137,130. As I can see, my number is increasing, so I'm going to have a percent of increase. So I'm going to take my two numbers, 137,130, and I'm going to subtract that in my original, which is 123. So 137,130 minus 127,123. That is going to give me an increase of 16,007. Now that's for Odessa. And Laredo, let me do that in a different color so it'll stand out. Now with Laredo, I'm going to compare their data. So with Laredo, I see in the year 2000 they had 193,117 people. In the year 2010, we had 250,304 people. And I can see here that is also increasing. So I'm also going to have a percent of increase for Laredo. So I'm going to take my number, 250,304, and I'm going to subtract that by 193,117. So when I subtract those two numbers, I see that I am left with 57,187. So now that I have my amount of increase, I need to go and find my percent of increase. And remember, my percent of increase is the amount of increase over my original amount. So first I'm going to do Odessa. Odessa has percent of increase. So my amount of increase was 16,007. So 16,007. And I am going to put that over my original. And my original was, if we look back at our table, In the year 2000, Odessa had 121,123. So 16,007 divided by 121,123. So that is going, let me go ahead and find that for you. So 16,007, and I'm dividing that, oops, I think I went too more. 16,007. There you go. Divided by 121,123. And that is going to give me a decimal of roughly about 0.13. Okay, so that is for Odessa. Now for Loretto, I'm going to also do percent of increase. My amount of increase was 57,187 over my original amount, which in the year 2000 was 193,117. So I'm going to go ahead and use my calculator. So I have 57,187 divided by 193 and 117. 193,117. And that is going to give me roughly a percent of 0.296, which is going to equal to about 0.30. All I did was take my 0.296. I'm going to round with my 9, and I'm going to look at my 6. And if you remember from elementary school, the rhyme says 5 or more, add 1 more. So I'm going to add 1 more, and that's going to make this a 0. I'm going to make this the 3. So my rounding is now going to equal to 0.30. So now I'm left with 0.13 and 0.30. And down here in the very bottom, I'm going to have 0.13. And I have to use DP to go from decimal to percent. And I'm going from decimal to percent, so I need to go to my right 2 spaces. So I see that my decimal is going to turn into 13%. For Loretto, my decimal was 0.30. So again, I'm going to use DP. I'm going from decimal to percent. So I'm going to move my decimal to the right 2 spaces. So I move my decimal to the right 2 spaces, and that is going to give me 30%. So when I look at my answers, I see that Loretto had the bigger increase with 30%. Now, if you have any questions, any comments, please let us know before class so that we can try and answer them as soon as you're stuck. Good luck to you guys, and you'll make sure you look at Edmodo for your homeworks